Today is not just about watching a documentary. It's about igniting powerful conversations and empowering each other with knowledge. Together, we are the ripple effect of change, creating a future where health, freedom, and transparency are protected and valued.
Terry Hayter, here she comes. I met Terry quite a few years ago in 2022. Terry, I have a few words to say about you, so hold your horses. Terry doesn't want me to talk about her, but I do want to acknowledge the huge role that Terry has played in launching Mama Bears and the need for Mama Bears to exist. So I teamed up with Terry in 2022 when some of the freedom fighters were going out to these pop-up clinics where they were vaccinating kids 5 to 11. And we felt we needed to launch some kind of awareness for parents. So we were doing that very busily, going out in the cold and standing at the pop-up clinics and having police tell us we were going to be served with trespassing and so on. It was a very exciting time. And at that point, I guess we gained some notoriety. And one of my colleagues from Stanford B called me and she said, you need to hook up with Mama Bears. And I said, I have no idea what Mama Bears is. Well, let me tell you. She gave me Terry's number, we connected, and it's been a great working relationship and friendship ever since. So Terry, being the founder of the movement, it started in 2021. And it focused on protecting and advocating for the safety and well-being of children, which we still do. Terry is a retired correctional officer and an active member of Police on Guard. Terry has spent years dedicated to raising awareness about the risks that children face in the world today. As a mother of 3 and a grandmother to 6, she is deeply committed to empowering parents and the knowledge and resources they need to protect their children from harm. Through her tireless advocacy and personal experience, Terry has sparked a wave of action inspiring others to take proactive steps in safeguarding future generations. Hence why we are here today with Mama Bears Project Niagara. Her work continues to make a profound impact, creating a brighter and safer future for children everywhere. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me give a warm welcome to Mama Bears founder, Terry Hayter.
Thank you, Pat and Barb. I want to acknowledge they did all the work putting this on this afternoon. So thank you very much. This is a very important film for everybody to see, and it was their work, and of course CHD and Brian Burris that put this together. But thank you all for coming out to see this. A little bit about Mama Bears. Back in the fall of 2021, when they started to roll out the COVID shot for kids, several members of Police on Guard got together and said, we need to do something to protect the children. And that's how Mama Bears was formed. And originally our intent was to share information about the dangers of the COVID shot. And then we have just organically grown to be a resource center for parents for lots of different topics for children. So when we did that, we needed a new website. And we were truly blessed to cross paths with a lady that was very talented and passionate about protecting children. And I'm going to ask her to stand up here to acknowledge her, but nobody's going to be able to see her because it's dark. But anyway, I would like to acknowledge Janet Fisher. She is the one that's designed and built our website, which I'm a little prejudiced, but I think it's a fabulous website full of information. So, Janet, I can see you again. Bottom of our hearts, thank you so very much for all the time and effort you put into that website. So speaking of the website, Besides information about the COVID shot, you'll find information about the regular schedule of vaccines, information about masking, internet safety, gender dysphoria. We have a section called child-related websites where you'll find information from everything about parents' rights groups to how to speak to children about cancer, information on cystic fibrosis. If anybody knows of a great website that's helpful for parents, please let us know and we will add that because we are a resource for parents to come and get information. So we couldn't forget the most vulnerable, and that's the unborn. So on our website, on the pregnant and nursing moms, you'll find information, obviously for pregnant and nursing moms. And we're very proud to have worked with Canadian COVID Care Alliance, which is now Canadian Critical Care Alliance on the pregnancy campaign. We put together a questionnaire with the answers and with the corresponding resources to those answers that a pregnant woman can take into their doctors and ask the questions, have the answers, and there's the links with the resources, because we know the majority of the doctors aren't going to know the answers, because believe it or not, they're still pushing this COVID shot on pregnant women, which is really scary. So that empowers the women to be able to say no. So if you know of anybody that's pregnant and is questioning about vaccines, please let them know about our website. They can download it from there. We really will not know the impact of the mental health that the lockdowns and mandates had on our children. But we thought we needed to do something. So we reached out to Theo Fleury, and in a heartbeat, he connected us with his partner Eric Cousin from St. Clair Global. And when we explained to Eric what we were doing, he kindly offered to put together a free mental health program for us. It's a 6-part series. The first part is Eric and Theo talking about their struggles with mental health and how they came through it and are now thriving. And the other 5 sessions are all different doctors, different subjects, anything from schizophrenia to how your gut health affects your mental health to tapping as a family. What child would want to do this, right? I mean, it's an excellent resource. It's free. It's on our website under our mental health page. And school. We all know what's happening in the schools. It is scary. So on our alternative schooling page, you'll find information about learning pods and how to build a pod, what it is, and what we want to encourage parents to think outside the box. There's nothing that says you have to have a licensed teacher to teach out a pod. You have a group of parents that are in agreement with how they want to do it, you have a pod. That actually somebody shared with us how a group of parents got together and they opened a yurt school. I had to look up what a yurt was. I didn't know. I thought that sounds impressive. But anyway, it is very good what they've done. Now, something I wasn't aware of was unschooling. I wasn't aware of that until recently, so we have a webinar we did with a couple of moms that successfully unschooled their kids. And there's also a link to Tasha Fishman. She's a mother that pulled her kids out during COVID and struggled through the whole homeschooling, unschooling, how do you do it? So now she's a great resource for anybody that's looking at that option. She'll be able to help you avoid a lot of the mistakes that she made. But a lot of parents don't have that choice. A lot of parents don't have the option of pulling their kids out of school. So what do you do if your kids are in the public school system? On our public school page, you'll find the links to the exemption forms with the instructions on how you can submit them. Because contrary to what you're told, your child does not need to be vaccinated to attend school in Ontario or New Brunswick. There's a guide on how to challenge the school board, how to be an effective delegate. We have a guide on how to have an effective meeting with your child's teacher. Questions to ask that you may not think of. When you walk into the classroom, look around, because we all know what some of the posters that are on the walls, and the teacher may take those posters down. So walk around and look at the books, because that'll give you an indication of what kind of material she's going to be sharing with your child. Ask about the internet. Where is your child going to have access to the internet? What kind of firewall? I don't know, detector or whatever, so that your child can't come across pornography or something while at school. So there's a list of questions you take with you, and you can have a good dialogue with the teacher, but questions that, as a parent, I would never have thought to ask. We also have an official notice that you can print off, send it to the school. It talks about the Health Care Act in Ontario. It's only effective in Ontario, but it actually mentions in there the criminal code and assault. If they want to give your child any kind of medical intervention without your approval, be proactive. Send that to your school's principal and the teacher. Let them know that you're watching. Because you need to be involved on a daily basis, because you don't know what's going on in the classroom unless you're asking and you're involved. Ask your child. It's sad that you have to, but ask your child when they come home, did any adult say it was okay to lie to mom and dad? Are your friends changing their names at school? Is anybody changing clothes? Just tips that, that we would probably not think to ask, but the culture of the schools right now, you need to. So we invite you to check that out. And then when we started thinking about, man, some of these parents, when they found out what they've done to their child by giving them this shot, they're going to go off the wall. So how can we help them? We reached out to Ted Coops from Vaccine Choice Canada. If you don't know his story, his child was vaccine injured and eventually died. He offered to do a short video for us, and it's on our homepage called Life After Vaccine Injury. I encourage everybody to take 20 minutes and watch it. He walks you through going through the anger of your decision to actually being at peace with your decision. And as a parent, we all make mistakes with our children, and we carry guilt. And listening to that personally for me gave me some peace. So that's on our homepage, so please check that out. Okay, I think I've talked enough. I want to say thanks to everybody. When we started, we said if we save one child, everything that we've done will be worth it. Well, we know that we have saved more than one child, and by everybody being here today, participating in this and supporting us is going to enable us to carry on what we were doing. So you can all give yourself an applause, because by supporting us, you are helping to save the children, and I thank you very much for that. So please follow us on social media, like and share our posts. If anybody wants to help out handing cards, it's something that I incorporate into my day. It's just a natural thing. I have them in my pockets. I'm at the grocery store, I'm walking the dog. I see somebody with a child, I walk up to them and say, excuse me, I see you have a child, can I give you this card? It's a link to a website, it's a resource center for parents. In, 3-4 years, however long it is, I've had one parent say no. So if you want cards afterwards, please see us at the table. We have lots to share with you if you want to hand them out. And again, thank you ever so much for coming to support us. Thank you.
I think my question would be to Dr. Speicher. Where do you see us moving forward? Like, where do you see, what are our next steps? Because in 5 years, we've made a lot of progress in terms of us understanding what's going on, us reading the vast emotions that we've been faced. But in terms of policy and the direction of not just this country, but moving forward with what do we do next?
I could probably start with that. So moving forward, we have to gut our health institutions. We have to replace them with people of integrity, people who know what they're doing. We have to because otherwise we're just going to do the same thing in the future. We need to distance ourselves from global entities. Canadians need to look after Canadians first, and then we can help others once we've looked after ourselves. We don't need people who don't live in Canada telling us how to look after ourselves. We have to separate. And I would say we need the equivalent of an RFK Jr. We don't have that in Canada, and we're going to have no effective change without that. And so on the immediate horizon, we're dealing right now with the avian influenza virus. And I think that's the one we have to watch very carefully, because again, we're seeing, for people that don't understand, there's an interface there between animal and human health with the avian influenza virus. We're also married in Canada to what's called the World Organization for Animal Health, basically equivalent of the World Health Organization, but as applies to animal health, and work very closely together. And again, this has a direct impact on not just animal health, but human health. I want to highlight that right now because the World Organization for Animal Health promotes this policy. If any animal tests positive by a PCR test for the avian flu, all of the animals get slaughtered. They call it the stamping out policy. And once again, just like we saw with COVID, there's zero recognition of the value and the validity of naturally acquired immunity. And what this does is this is hurting our food supply, right? So for those who don't understand, in Canada, we've had outbreaks, multiple outbreaks of avian flu since 2021. The stamping out policy is not fixing the problem. And the United States has been dealing with it for 5 consecutive years, right? This is going to hurt our food supply if we continue down this road, right? So which obviously has an impact on our health. And we're seeing that starting to come into policy. In our Senate right now, we have a pandemic preparedness plan that's being evaluated and being voted on. And it states right in there, I've read the documentation, and I encourage all of you to, that the goal is to get us to move away from a reliance on protein sources from animals with pandemic potential, is how they put it, and move to protein sources that don't have pandemic potential. That's the classic, you'll eat bugs and you'll love it. And I'll finish with this. Also, to answer your question directly, if we're going to look after human health properly, we have to stop, our health agencies have to stop the perseveration on PCR testing and using PCR as the sole basis for diagnoses of diseases. And we have to embrace the concept of naturally acquired immunity. It is absolutely legitimate.
Wow. Big thing. Sir. First of all, if we got our whole public health thing is to acknowledge there are people who are vaccine injured and are government and enforcing vaccines on people has caused harm, and therefore must put research funds and healthcare funds into helping them. We don't know why they're harmed or what mechanism is there. And two, the big thing is this being passed on to our offspring? Our next work in the research that I'm on is to compare vaxxed versus unvaxxed sperm to see is this DNA, are things being passed on to our offspring? The full extent of harm due to a flu-like virus, SARS-2, could be a lifelong generational global change to our DNA. And there are things we won't even know in our lifetime how much harm has this caused. So there's big answers. And two, we must call for a moratorium on these vaccines here at home. If you're online or if you're the Vaxxed table out there, and I was gonna talk on this at the end, but there's a letter that the CCCA has wrote based on the DNA and the SB 40 in these shots. There's a website up, and it's Call to Halt. CALL2, number 2, Halt 19.ca. And we are calling for all people, citizens and experts to sign this and call for a moratorium on these shots in Canada. And in a week or so, Maxine Bernier and myself are publicly calling for a halt on these as part of the election.
I just want to say thank you for your sacrifice and your moral work. It's not a lot of recognized and too many people thank you. You have all of my respect.
I'm going to bring another person up, and her name is Carmen Cabral. It is my honor to introduce a courageous mother, truth warrior, and advocate for medical freedom, Carmen. Tonight marks the first time she is sharing her family's deeply personal and heartbreaking journey after her son suffered a life-altering injury from the COVID-19 vaccine. Carmen's story is one of resilience, love, and the unwavering fight for justice. Through immense challenges, she has found the strength to step forward and speak for those who have been ignored, silenced, or dismissed. Her experience is a powerful reminder that these mandates have real and lasting consequences. Not just statistics, but human lives forever changed. Please join me in welcoming Carmen as she bravely shares her truth and the profound impact this has had on her son and her entire family. Carmen?
Hi there. I'm going to start off by saying I'm going to get very emotional. I'm going to cry. So please bear with me.
Put the microphone closer so we can hear.
Closer. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, that's better. Thank you.
So I was trying to say I probably will get emotional, and please bear with me. I did prepare a speech. I tried to keep it short, but there's just too much information. So at any time, if you need to cut me off, please feel free. Okay, so I'll start about good afternoon or good evening, I don't even know what time it is. I'm here to share my son's story. I will be reading because I couldn't memorize it all. His story is a heartbreaking story through no fault of his own, not by accident, not by fate. His life, as he knew it, changed forever. The COVID vaccine caused him severe, irreversible, irreparable, and life-altering consequences. His life, his health, his identity, his schooling, his future career were stolen from him in the blink of an eye. This is the reality that no child or parent should have to go through. As a family, we were on the fence to take the vaccine or not. We were concerned, like many others, about the unknown. We wanted to believe that the country and the province's doctors would stand by the premise of do no harm. They wouldn't be pushing a vaccine that was not safe and that hadn't been tested, would they? They used fear and coercion to divide and conquer. They used tactics to play on our emotions to create a veil of fear to provoke the urgency to get vaccinated. We tried to learn and understand the differences between the various vaccine companies, and we were told that Pfizer was 95% safe, and it was the safest for children and teenagers. So reluctantly, we made the decision to get vaccinated, and not because we wanted to, but because We bought into the moral narrative that we needed to protect our loved ones and we needed to stop the transmission. My husband and I got vaccinated April 2021, and our boys got vaccinated May 24th, 2021. Looking back, I wish we had been informed that there were experts, one of which is here today, Dr. Byron Brittle, that voiced science-based opinions that there was growing evidence in places around the world. I believe it was in Israel, where the vaccine was causing myocarditis and pericarditis in teenage boys and young men. Had we listened to him and to other voices, I would be here today speaking to you about my son. My son would not have been vaccinated and would not have ended up almost dead. You heard correctly. He was on the brink of death. Before I fill you in on the chain of events, I just want to give you some background. He was born on Valentine's Day, February 14, 2005. Ironically, the symbol we associate for Valentine's Day is the heart, and his heart has been damaged forever. As a child, he was an adult in a child's body. He was responsible for his homework, was inquisitive, he was self-taught, he was very curious about technology, interested in cars and engines, loved to play sports, loved to watch sports. He helped around the house or wherever he could, just because he could. His famous childhood words were, "I do it." And he continued to do that throughout his childhood and his teenage years. In 2017, he was 12, and one day in the summer, he came to me and he said he found a school in Brampton where you could learn how to fly a plane. He asked me if I could call them and ask them if he can go take flying lessons. I told him I thought he was too young. The conversation went back and forth, and his argument, this is the argument of a 12-year-old, he said to me, "But Mom, if you need to, they say you must be at least 16 to get a pilot's license. So that means that you have to learn before so that you can get your license at 16. And I said softly to him, "But you're 12. And to put an end to the conversation, I called, and to my shock, they said, "Bring him. Just pay the membership, and he could learn how to fly, and he can do the ground school." And I repeated, I said, "But he's 12 years old." And they said that was fine. So he was ecstatic, of course. He took his first few lessons that summer. And his very first lesson, he wore a Steph Curry t-shirt that said, "I can do all things." And sure enough, that's what he wanted to do. He flew occasionally that summer and for the next couple summers, but then he was involved in sports, and we made the decision that it was an expensive hobby for a teenager. So we told him that we would fully support him if he wanted to do that after he finished high school. In 2021, he was now 16. My husband and I got our vaccine in April, as I mentioned earlier, and the boys got theirs in May. I started to have pain in my arm. My arm felt like it weighed 20 pounds. I was having involuntary twitching of my fingers and my right leg, and I had ringing in my ears. I went to the emerge a couple times. I waited till about the end of May, and at that point, the boys had just gotten vaccinated, and I wasn't sure if they should have or not, but they went ahead and got vaccinated, and I just thought my symptoms were going to be temporary. When I went to the hospital, they took my vitals, and my blood pressure was high, and I couldn't understand, I didn't feel anything, but I kept saying, "Can you tell me what my blood pressure was?" And they said, "Oh, you're nervous. Oh, it's white coat syndrome." I said, "No, I'm not nervous. I came here because I chose to." So that kind of stayed with me, like, why was my blood pressure so high? So I was referred to a number of doctors, and I kept saying, "But all of these things happened after my vaccine," and I was told that it was too early. There was not enough data to connect these issues. So at one point I shared my story with an EKG or ECG technician, and she told me off the record that she was testing at least 20 people per day for cardiac issues. And a doctor, I was referred to an orthopedic surgeon because they actually triggered frozen shoulder in my shoulder. And he told me that there was an acronym which was SIRVA, S-I-R-V-A. So I went home and looked it up, and it was shoulder injury related to vaccine administration. So the next time I saw him, I said, oh, by the way, I looked up that acronym you told me about, and he denied it. He said, I never said that. I said, yes, you did. And he said, no, I never said that. And I thought, what the hell, you know? I didn't make it up. I couldn't come up with that acronym on my own. So I knew something was off. So by then, my husband and I made the decision that we were not going to get the second vaccine. My symptoms were not going away. And we did not want to have the boys vaccinated either. But shortly afterward, the Minister of Education announced that in order to go back to school, you needed to be fully vaxxed, which was 2 vaccines. So now, what do we do? So I shared my concerns with the boys, and they were tired of being home. They wanted to be back at school, like most teenagers. And my son was going into grade 11. He had only done 1 semester in high school. The school got shut down in grade 9. So he got his second shot July 20th, 2021. And that summer was a really hot, sticky, muggy summer. The day after the second shot, my older son was feverish and felt terrible. But my younger son didn't really feel much at the time. However, as the days progressed, he complained that he was tired a lot. And I just chalked it up to the heat, not thinking that it was anything else, and thought maybe he was getting the lazy teenager genes because, you know, teenagers were known to be lazy, although he was always the one that, you know, got up early and just kind of did everything. He was very proactive. He'd go to bed early, get up early, but throughout the month of August, he stayed in bed later, and occasionally he complained of upper back pain and shoulder pain. And the pain traveled, like one day it was one shoulder, one day it was another shoulder. We thought it was kind of funny. So we thought it was like muscular or postural or something, and I would rub A535 on him. Then one day at the end of August, he wasn't feeling that well, and he didn't have much of an appetite and went to bed early. He woke up at 1 a.m., he didn't feel well, he had pressure in his chest, tightness in his chest, and he felt a bit nauseous. I panicked. I thought, oh my God, these are symptoms of a heart attack, and we need to get him to the hospital. So after he emerged, they took his blood work. They found that his heart enzymes, the troponin enzyme, was unmeasurable. So your normal troponin is supposed to be under 15, and the maximum that the blood work measures is 25,000. So he was over 25,000 for 4 days. The nurse at the ER said that he was lucky to have come in because he could have had a major heart attack or a cardiac arrest and died. So he was diagnosed with myopericarditis, which is myocarditis and pericarditis, so inflammation of the heart muscle itself and the outside sac. Not only did he have what they said were rare events, he had 2 rare events. And then I learned that it wasn't so rare. The nurse at the hospital mentioned they were getting 5 to 10 cases per week at that hospital alone. So if you multiply that by all the hospitals, who knows how many there were. He was treated with Advil, ibuprofen, and it was supposed to be a 3-week course, and he was referred to St. Kitts in Toronto. He was followed at St. Kitts, and sometime in October, his troponins were down around 30, and they told him he can go back to his life, he could play sports, and just go live your life. So fast forward a bit now, June 26, 2023, he had been enrolled in the Science and Technology program at Parkhead High School in Mississauga. He graduated with honors. He was awarded the Leadership Award. A week later, he started flight school. He went straight in. That was his dream since he was 12 years old. October of that year, 2023, he got his private pilot's license. By April 2024, he completed and passed all the written work and all the testing, the written testing for his commercial pilot's license. His commercial flight test was going to be the week of April 15th. But on April 15th, we had 2 flights scheduled in preparation for that flight test. He got to the school, but the clouds were low. He was grounded. He couldn't fly. So he sat and waited till the clouds to lift so he can go on his next flight. He was sitting talking to a friend, and he started to feel lightheaded, yawned, and he collapsed. He had a cardiac arrest. You heard me correctly. He had a cardiac arrest. So how does a 19-year-old who played sports all his life, didn't smoke, didn't drink, didn't do drugs, ate mostly healthy homemade foods, many that he cooked himself because he just was that kind of kid who just could, and so he did. He had no underlying heart condition, but he had had the myocarditis. So apparently the myocarditis left scarring in his heart, and the scarring caused interference with the electrical component of the heart. He had no pulse, he was not breathing, he was turning blue, his organs were not getting blood, and his brain was without oxygen. There were 3 guardian angels there, and I'm going to name them: Michelle, TJ, and Dan. They were 2 flight instructors and a retired firefighter who worked at the flight school. Michelle gave him CPR, and the defibrillator was used to shock his heart back. Had the clouds not been low that day, he would have been in a plane alone. So thank God it happened where it happened. His world changed at that moment. The survival rate for out-of-hospital cardiac arrest is less than 1%. When he woke up, he looked down. He saw his shirt had been cut open. They told him he had gone to sleep for a bit, so he realized something was wrong. He teared up, and the first thing he said was, "Will I be able to fly? I want to fly." An MRI was done, and they found the scarring. They suggested that most likely it was the cause of the cardiac arrest. We had genetic testing done to determine that there had been an underlying condition or a predisposition to a cardiac problem. Nothing was found. He was implanted with a subcutaneous defibrillator in case of a repeat event, so he is at risk of future events. I'm angry, he's angry. He was an innocent bystander to the COVID mandates. He's had a number of challenges. How does a 19-year-old move forward after his life crumbled around him? The day after the defibrillator was implanted, he was sent home in excruciating pain to a life that he didn't recognize. It was like he was put on a raft with a defibrillator in his chest and no paddle to navigate his new reality. He lost his identity. All he ever wanted to do was become a pilot. There's no plan B, and almost a year later, he still doesn't have plan B. He's disillusioned and angry at the world. I need a 19-year-old does not have the life experience or emotional tools for coping strategies like an adult might have. The emotional and psychological impact is massive for him and for us. We live in fear every day. If he develops a cold or a cough or a fever, I go into panic mode. If his bedroom door is closed past his normal waking time, I panic. I have to check on him, or I'll send him a text message. I'll check in on him. Is he breathing or is he alive? And this is for real. This happens so often. At 19, he was on track for the career of his dreams. He was literally spreading his wings in a heartbeat, or lack thereof. He lost his independence. His driver's license was suspended for 6 months. It took an extra month to actually get back. He lost his identity. It was his dream to become a commercial pilot since that summer day when he was 12 years old. His new identity involves being a cardiac patient that will have to have a defibrillator replaced every 5 years. His chest will have to be open every 5 years. He is now 20 years old. Can you imagine how traumatic this is in itself? He lost his schooling, he lost his pilot friends, he lost the place that he went to every day. His friends have moved on. They were moving on with their studies and he was left behind. His graduation should be this coming April, next month, starting 2 weeks from now. And he is at ground zero again with no graduation, no job, no career, nothing. There's no plan B at this point. So I'm stepping up to share my son's story because I feel that there's an invisible line where the public, doctors, lawyers, politicians are unwilling to speak the truth. And this is amazing. I'm so glad I finally got here, and thank you, Leslie, for directing me here. It is becoming more evident that the narrative is wrong. We were manipulated to get vaccinated. And what happened to my son is a crime. Vaccines are supposed to prevent the vaccinated from disease, and they're supposed to stop transmission. The COVID-19 didn't do either. They manipulated us and they lied. In Canada, valid consent for medical treatment should be given freely without pressure, duress, coercion, or undue influence from a physician or a third party. The government was the third party. My son is a victim of receiving medical treatment by undue influence. Otherwise, he would have been excluded from attending school in person and excluded from having a normal teenage social life. There needs to be a stop to this, and there needs to be accountability, there needs to be transparency, and there needs to be validation for those that have been injured. Christine Elliott, the Deputy Premier and Minister of Health in 2020, had made a comment to the Auditor General's report. She did not agree with the Auditor General's report on the handling of the COVID-19. She said that they had mischaracterized the province's response. But before that, she said, as a government, we expect to be and should be held accountable for our actions and performance, especially in a crisis. So why are they not being held accountable? The vaccine was to be the cure, but instead it became the threat. We need to speak up and our voices need to be heard. Thank you.
Anybody at the table like to reply to that as far as action?
I just want to say I'm really sorry that that happened to you and so many other families, like myself, were not given full informed consent when we vaccinated our children and resulted in severe impairments. And that's what led me to do what I've done for over 2 decades, is to fight so passionately for these children, to bring informed consent to parents. I was just speaking to somebody out there earlier and saying that we're really trying to get to the parents when they're pregnant, before they have the children. They're trying to vaccinate, pregnant women now because we're informing too many of them. And so we're, as a community, as a grassroots, I think the Mama Bears really has the right idea for us to educate people, to say no to mandates, to demand informed consent, for them forcing vaccines for school children. I've been fighting for 7 years against the unlawful suspensions for the parents who won't give their private medical information and sign the exemptions for their children to be able to attend school in Ontario without being vaccinated. And it's just so important that we stand up to that together, because we've now reached a point in Ontario. When I first started fighting this particular law, egregious law, 7 years ago, we had the support of a few hundred, and now we have the support of hundreds of thousands. And so, I understand very too painfully well the guilt of being the parent who gives the thing to your child that you trusted was safe and effective, and it wasn't. I understand that guilt so well, and for myself, I've learned to helping others, reaching out to others, and then after I kind of have this joke that I'm like a dinosaur now because I've been around so long doing this, that I have people who will sometimes email me and just say, advocacy is very hard work, and it's all volunteer, and it's late nights and early mornings, and a lot of people need help and not enough helpers. And so sometimes I can get really down and I think, oh, I'm just not doing enough, I'm not helping enough people. And COVID really was one of those times where I said, there's too many people that help, and there's not enough of us. And then but then I would get an email from someone and say, I watched your video or I read your story or something, and I didn't vaccinate my child. And that, for me, was that one child. If I could just reach one child, and then it just repeats over and over and over again. So as a community and as parents of vaccinated your children, if you want to reach out and come and help us with our grassroots movement with Mama Bears and with Children's Health Defence Canada, that's the way forward for all of us.
So, Carmen, I want to say thank you for sharing that story. Your son's story is a very important one. I can tell you as a vaccinologist who developed concerns about the COVID-19 shots, I just want to make sure you should never feel any guilt whatsoever. I and others understand absolutely why I did this. I want to make it very clear where the blame lies. It starts from the top down. I can see a shirt over here with two pictures. It starts with Justin Trudeau spewing hatred at all of us for expressing concerns over these things. And Theresa Tam is the real person, right? Theresa Tam, she's in charge of Health Canada, and I can tell you as an expert, I have reviewed all kinds of internal communications within Health Canada. I've looked at a lot of documentation they reviewed before they authorized these shots by interim order. They never should have been authorized. These scientists know way, way, way better, or they're completely incompetent and should not have their jobs. I can tell you that 100%. It frustrates me because I got up on an interview 3.5 years ago and expressed exactly the concern, the very concern that ended up causing the problem for your son. I was asked a question on the radio program whether there could be a potential link between the modified RNA shots and cases of myocarditis were being observed in young men in Israel. And I stated that, yes, I saw the potential for that. And I went on to explain. And a lot of people don't realize in that interview, because I was focused on the science. Now I don't focus on the science. You don't need to, because that's not where the problem lies. The science is very clear on this, right? They've always been wrong to be pushing these COVID-19 shots. It comes down to the politics, and that's what we need to understand. And in that radio show, the reason why I went public, and I never got an opportunity on that radio show, or ever since, because the censorship ever since that radio show was so intense and it continues to this day. But this is the situation. I got to see a regulatory document that had been submitted to the Japanese Health Regulatory Agency. Health Canada received, all the health regulatory agencies received this. And what it showed me, which I didn't get a chance to share that day because I was starting talking about the science, I was trying to get there, is that it showed me that we were being outright lied to. Health Canada and all the regulatory agencies were lying to us. We were told the shots stay in the shoulder. The regulatory document I showed, and I can tell you, it wasn't a surprise to me when I saw the results in this regulatory document, because this technology had been in development for more than a decade before it was authorized by interim order as a vaccine. Trying to name vaccines was a last-ditch effort to try and rescue this technology. And for 12 years of development, they knew that this technology, the lipid nanoparticles, little fat bubbles that carry the modified RNA, they knew they got distributed far and wide throughout the body, and that they were quite toxic. I, as a scientist, they said there were proprietary aspects to this that they could not disclose. So when I heard the message that these shots stayed at the injection site, I had to believe it. I had to believe there was some kind of proprietary tweaking of the technology that caused it to behave completely differently from how it had throughout this entire history. Right? I had to believe that because that's what I was told. And I understand wanting to protect proprietary property. Fine, intellectual property, trying to protect it. So when I saw the documentation that said, no, this is behaving exactly like it has for the past 12 years, that was the shock to me, right, that we were being lied to, outright lied to. And we have examples now from the FDA, from Health Canada, and all kinds of provincial health regulators throughout Canada, that they have been lying directly to us, and they have been failing to disclose very important information. I just want to give you one other tiny little example. Christine mentioned pushing shots on pregnant women, and you mentioned Christine Elliott. She stood up in our provincial parliament and actually stated explicitly, it's on video, I've got the video on my computer, of her telling pregnant women that Health Canada had stated the COVID-19 vaccines were definitively safe for pregnant women, and she pushed it them on pregnant women. And I can tell you, our Health Canada has now stood up in our federal parliament through a federal order paper question and has admitted in our federal parliament that they never approved any safety indication for these COVID-19 vaccines in pregnant women. for example. So Christine Elliott, she completely and directly lied standing in our parliament. We're talking to pregnant women. And for those of you who don't believe me, you can even go online right now. They tend not to put it with the vials. You know, we tend to get these blank sheets when they open up the vials at the pharmacies and so on. But online are the monographs, the product monographs, which are the instructions for these vaccines. You can go online right now to Health Canada, and you can pull that up. It's called a monograph. I encourage you to do this, monograph. All right, for the Moderna and Pfizer shots. Right to this very day, the most current ones that are up there. I encourage you to read it. When you pull it up, hit Control F on your computer, which allows you to search for a term. Type in pregnant. Type in pregnant. You'll see a special population there, and you will see the manufacturers to this very day state in their product monographs that they have no data to support the safety of these shots, nor the effectiveness of these shots in pregnant women. So again, it's being pushed right to this very day. It's a complete and utter lie. And these people who did that to you and caused this to happen to your son, they're still lying to us about these things to today. And they've got the gall now to point to people like us up here and say, we're the reason for vaccine hesitancy. No, they're the reason for vaccine hesitancy because they can't be trusted. Once you've lied once, you're a liar. And your job now is to try and earn back the trust of the rest of us. And that's where Health Canada stands right now. Stop pointing the fingers, Health Canada, at everybody else claiming they're the ones driving vaccine hesitancy. You lie and you deceive Canadians, and you are 100% responsible. Dr. Teresa Tam, you and your organization are 100% responsible for driving vaccine hesitancy, and everyone should be hesitant when when Health Canada is lying to you about vaccines.
Can I just say thank you very much for getting up in front of all these people and telling your story. Very emotional story. I live in the States, and I can't believe where we are right now. We have somebody who people have called insane and crazy and a lunatic and this and that is now the head of all of the health agencies in the United States. And it's because people haven't been quiet about what's happened to them, what's happened to their children, what's happened to their loved ones. And so I think we are heading in the right direction. Never in my wildest dreams would I have believed that last week, Thursday, a doctor who was on the Vaxxed bus with us, Dr. Suzanne Humphreys, could go on Joe Rogan and be seen by 100 million people. Like, this stuff is starting to get out there, and it's because of people like you telling your stories that we're starting to really, really make grounds. And I think you should be running for some sort of office here, by the way. Great doctor.
I am extremely thankful for parents like her who get up and share. Our kids are innocent bystanders in this. It's not their fault, and yet they will live with this their entire life. As a parent, it's not your fault. Our governments knew, as Byron said, they knew the science and they kept pushing this. All of you who have been vaccine injured or know someone who is vaccine injured have a very important story, and it needs to be told, and people have been silent for too long. It needs to be told, have courage, share it. Dan Hartman's son, Sean, died at age 17, and this past week, our federal courts denied the rights of that going to trial. It's just wrong. It's just evil. Evil. And in the the Alberta report co-published the Dr. Jerry Davidson and Byron and I, we show our government entities in their policies only rely on 2% of primary scientific data. That's it. 2% is actual science that it's based on. We must return to evidence-based policies, evidence-based healthcare. There's a whole pile of locked individuals out there. It's not a vaccine thing. It's very similar. It's improper use of a antibiotic. It's been changed. It's been pulled. Except we must always follow evidence-based healthcare based on what the science shows, and not push a narrative for our own gain, which could cause others to be harmed, which is, and the FDA, when they approved COVID-19 shots for children, said we won't know the outcome until we give this to our children. You must work out this before you give it to your children. If you don't give it.
Thank you to our panel. Now I'm going to take some questions from the audience. So if you do have a question, you can carry yourself up to the microphone in level 1 in the middle of the floor. So I think, Liz, you have a question, and if anybody else does, just have a little line up there. Jen, you want to start?
Hello, my name is Jennifer, and I was diagnosed with myasthenia gravis in 1986. And I recovered, but I had a relapse in early 2000s, at which point I started taking IVIG infusions at the hospital. And I did that for about 14 years until Canada allowed subcutaneous treatments at home. Then 2021 came with the rollout of the vaccines, and now we have to question the safety of the blood supply, because many people who are donating their blood are vaccinated. So my question is, do we know the safety of Canada's blood supply?
Yeah, I can definitively answer that, no. And it needs to be investigated, absolutely should. Canadian Blood Services should be looking into this. I can't emphasize how easy the research would be to do, and relatively inexpensive. I mean, they're getting blood samples. They just need to know the vaccination status of individuals and when they receive the vaccine, and people are perfectly capable of testing for components of the vaccine. So I can tell you, I was asked to serve as an expert witness in a court case that took place in New Zealand. And it was a case where the parents were aware of this, and had the same question that you did. And so to be on the safe side, they wanted known donors for their child that it was a newborn, needed heart surgery, and blood was going to be needed. Blood transfusions were going to be required. All kinds of volunteers stepped forward to offer their blood. And the court ultimately ruled against that, would not allow it. They didn't want to allow that discussion to enter the narrative. But what I can tell you, this was very interesting. I was the only expert on the one side. There were multiple experts who were physicians on the other side representing the hospital. They came forward with their affidavits, and they just preached the narrative and were completely wrong and were not aware of the peer-reviewed scientific literature, right, saying that no, this stuff is gone very rapidly from the blood. And then in my affidavit I point out there, so this is the whole point, there's lots and lots of peer-reviewed scientific data, even more now than when this case occurred, which was, I can't remember, a year and a half, 2 years ago, something like that. And when they saw the data, and I think probably they were seeing it for the first time because people just are living in ignorance, the so-called experts, many of them are living in ignorance. They then had to completely change their affidavits. They came back with new sets of affidavits and had to completely correct the first affidavits and admit, but then try and downplay the impact of the evidence. Now, this is what I can tell you. So we know clearly these shots last, we were all told at the very beginning that this was mRNA, and it would be gone from the body very quickly. The lipid nanoparticles would be gone from the body very quickly, and the expression of the spike protein would be quite transient. We now know it's synthetic RNA. That's the other thing. They didn't educate the public. It's not natural RNA, messenger RNA. That's why I always refer to it as modified RNA. It's not technically messenger RNA or mRNA. That's naturally occurring. It's an incredibly fragile molecule. I'm sitting beside a molecular biologist, virologist. So he can tell you it's very fragile. It will last for a very short period of time. We're talking modified RNAs that last a long time in the body. The spike protein has been found for far longer than anybody ever imagined. Most recent evidence suggests in some individuals that they could potentially last up to almost 2 years. The record's now sitting at well over 700 days. And this is the whole point. So yes, it's there. It's in the blood. And then people were being allowed to get their shot and potentially donate the next day, donate blood. So there's no question that it's there. We just don't know how bad the contamination is. We don't know how extensive the contaminants are, and we don't know how long it lasts. But all this stuff is very easy to measure, and that's what I would say. So it's very easy. We look at the blood, we look at blood samples from people who received these shots, and we have to look at the potential presence of the vaccine, the intact vaccine. We have to look at the presence of the components of the vaccine, so that would be the lipid nanoparticles, the fat bubbles. We have to look at the potential presence of the modified RNA. In other words, are the vaccines present or any components thereof, and also any derivatives thereof, because it actually functions like a program. So it doesn't have the spike protein, but it's designed to get a person's body to manufacture the spike protein, right? So we also have to look at the potential presence of the spike protein. And now, as was pointed out, we need to add to that list a fourth thing. We also have to look for the presence of contaminating bacterial DNA, which was actually used to manufacture this. And for those of you who don't know, the vaccines that went into clinical trials were manufactured in a completely different way than the ones that went into people's arms. Remarkably, and that was not disclosed openly to the public. They used a completely different manufacturing strategy, one that loads up these vials with all kinds of contaminants, DNA contamination, and all those things need to be measured in the blood supply. And I can't emphasize that. Dr. David Speicher here on a regular basis assesses the RNA, and it's very easy to look for the spike protein and lipid nanoparticles and the RNA and the contaminating plasmid DNA. It's a very simple, quick study to do. We just need it to be done. So yes, there is contamination. How bad is it? We don't know, because Canadian Blood Services refuses to do the work.
So I would say that I have stopped taking the product. I will never take it again, because this is going to be on for years before. So just a note for everybody, don't take blood transfusions.
Thank you, Jen, for your question.
My name is Thomas Fisher. I want to just first of all thank you all for your bravery, for your willing to stand up with us when we're all standing there in 2019, 2020, going around trying to figure out what we could do. I have, and I also really want to thank Dr. Bertle Lake. My question is twofold. Number one, we know that they use the HIV system to deliver the virus. Peter Daszak research from Eco Health Alliance outlines it all. It's all there for our view. That's the new buzzword, long COVID. You look at the symptoms between the two, they're similar. So number one, there's a documentary to be had on that alone, how they did that, how they duped us all on that one. And then secondly, There's a story of villains and heroes here. You've got March 2019, October 2019, you got Milken Institute, Rick Bright, Marianne O'Hare, and Fauci, and the guy from the news channel, saying they want to open the spigot and avoid the research. 2019, then the event 201, 2019. How did they know? How did they know? They knew because of Eagle Health Alliance, USAID, NIHID, all that stuff. Dr. Brian, I'm encouraging you to go out there and take them on. Sorry, Mr. Burrows. I'm encouraging you to go out there and take these guys on. We'll all get behind you, I promise you. There's all of us are waiting for someone like you. That's my question. Thank you.
I always say this after making a film like this, the next thing I'm going to do is a romantic comedy, just to kind of lighten it up a little bit. That seems like that one might be down the road a little bit. But we are going to do something a little lighter next time, and that is going to be looking at the health of the unvaccinated. There's so many studies out there that are now coming out that are being talked about. We're going to work with RFK, and we're going to work with Dr. Brian Hooker, and they put a book together of, I don't know, you can get it up front. But it's basically looking at vaccinated versus unvaccinated, and I think that's what we have to do right now. We have to say, without a doubt, our unvaccinated kids are healthier than vaccinated kids, and watch people's heads explode, but then let's start the conversation. We have data now. We have tons and tons of data. So that's the next film. But yeah, that someone else is going to do that film. You know, we have incredible. This movement has incredible filmmakers, and Mickey Willis. I mean, the list goes on and on. So yeah, at some point. Love to talk to you.
Bring it on. I'd like to say one thing. You mentioned the issue of long COVID. I just wanted to address that really quickly, because long COVID gets confounded, although a lot of people publicly don't want to, because again, this is sort of a discussion that they don't want to have publicly, but it's confounded by the COVID-19 shots, right? And you can't parse out the two. But I just want to point out something. Because again, the science is actually quite commonsensical about this. Did anybody see the recent interview that Tucker Carlson did? And there was a concern about cancers, and there's a prediction there's going to be a big increase in cancer incidence. It's going to massively rise. And it was attributed in that interview, the doctor that he was interviewing is fairly well awake and aware of what's going on. But I just want to point out, because there's this conflation of long COVID with the vaccine, what the vaccine does. And I want to point out, long COVID, yeah, this is a virus that almost certainly was the result of gain of function research, so it's an unnatural virus. And it does seem to be able to cause long-term problems in some people. But I want to point out, when you're hearing this, long COVID, in terms of tissues that could be impacted, right, long-term from COVID, it depends. Natural infection, and the vast majority of people, does not spread. The key problem is the spike protein. That's why it's common to both the potentially natural infection and the shots. The spike protein is very harmful in the body. But when you have a natural infection, for the vast majority of people, it does not spread very far in the body. Especially now, it's an infection in the upper respiratory tract. Historically, it could get deeper and cause pneumonia in some people. So you're talking about the respiratory tract, and when you have a respiratory tract infection, you swallow some mucus. So a virus can potentially get into the GI tract. But for most people, that's about it when it comes to natural infection. So those are the potential areas that could be impacted by the natural infection. Unless you got very severe disease, where you have the very severe pneumonia, and the virus crossed into the blood and caused what we call viremia, and the virus started disseminating throughout the body. But that's very rare. It's a life-threatening condition, and especially nowadays, very extremely rare. But the shots, that's what I want to point out. And that was what was missed in that interview. We can ask questions about that. There's no question that the harm is far worse from the shots, because the shots bypass that. You're not limiting expression of the spike protein and the other components of the vaccine to the upper respiratory tract and a little bit in the gastrointestinal tract. You're exposing the entire body. So I just want to point that out. That's being conflated right now. A lot of medical professionals are talking about a lot of these problems, right? A lot of these problems are attributed to long COVID. No, probably a small fraction. The vast majority are due to the shot.
Liz?
When all this, I call it now the madness started, I actually started doing a little bit of research when the provincial government put together the Science Advisory Council to the government. And I started researching everybody that was on that council, and I noticed about 40% of them were behavioral scientists, which led me down the route to the behavioral scientist who won the Nobel Prize for that branch of science. So, in all the research, and going back to the beginning, there seem to be the same players. The Wellcome Trust, Johns Hopkins University, Chapel Hill in North Carolina, when they were just doing the projections. Well, I can project the sun will come out tomorrow and I can be wrong 50% of the time. So I want to fast forward the question. We noticed a big wage spike in the medical officers of health during COVID. They actually made more money than the Prime Minister of Canada. So I know that this is all coming from, provincially, from the Ministry of Health. I know money must be flowing from outside of Canada to fund all this push, this nudge in public health. And I'm sure the Dalalana School of Public Health has got to be ground zero in Canada, because it's behavioral psychology. They're pushing us, they're nudging us, they're guilting us. I mean, I'm not falling for it, but is there any way, and I'm asking this to the panel, how could I find out who got paid from Pfizer or Moderna to be massaging this story? Is it an impossible quest for freedom of information? I mean, there's got to be money flowing to keep this story going.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you at all, and I would love to have access to that information, but that's not my area of expertise. I actually have no idea, but if you can ever get that or find out how to get it, let's get it, because we need to see that for sure.
That's a big, cool question, which I too would love to find out. I do know that Masters Nexus Pandemic Center, which got built, received about 195 million in Gates funding. And there are people such as Timothy Caulfield, which Byron and I on March 4th actually walked up to him and went to shake his hand, and he was shocked and had no words, was too sick to shake our hands. Received about 6.4 million to push scientific misinformation, and Caulfield does not have a science degree and does not practice law. So why on earth is our government paying people like him millions to keep this BS going?
So I did a lot of research into the Della Lana School of Public Health. It was funded by Paul Della Lana. But in the history, what I found was in the it goes back before 1980s, but in the 1980s, it was called the Toronto School of Hygiene. And how that came about was the Rockefeller Foundation, you can find this on any Google search. The Rockefeller Foundation, they had 2 schools of public health, and one was at Harvard and one was at Johns Hopkins, and they wanted a 3rd one. So they came to Toronto, and they wanted to go through Toronto University, and so they created the Toronto School of Hygiene, and what is now called the Della Lana School of Public Health, was originally created by the Rockefellers. And they funded this, I think it was $650,000, but it was way back, like this was way back in the early 1960s. Yeah, very long time ago. So that was a lot of money back then, what they started. And so there was the universities are extremely heavily involved in all of this. So on the same campus, you have University of Toronto, the Toronto School of Public Health, and it was called Connaught Laboratories at the time, which became Sanofi Pasteur, and now it's Aventis Pasteur, which puts out 90% of the vaccines in the world. And so they're extremely closely connected to the universities, and we saw that when they mandated all universities to be vaccinated for children and students to attend. We actually found a document that listed how much money each university got across Canada. And so it's definitely out there, and the now Della Lana School of Public Health, every public health officer has to graduate from one of the 3 public health institutions. So there's the Della Lana School of Public Health, there's the Harvard, the Johns Hopkins, and you must graduate from one of those to become a public health officer, because we call them indoctrination centers. They have to be taught how to bully us properly. They did parachute one. Yeah, they parachuted one medical officer of health right from Harvard right into Norfolk County because we needed a new public health officer. And then, yes, they did a lot of damage. And then, so in Norfolk, I guess if people don't know, it's farm country. So what they came in to do specifically was that public health officer came in to make sure that every migrant worker on the farms was fully vaccinated, and we were getting calls that migrant workers were dying in quarantine at the airport, yes, because they took their passports from them, but not their passports, like their visas to come into the country, their work visas as migrant workers. And Canada, people don't believe this, but we are heavily reliant on migrant workers to do a lot of our agricultural work. It really impacts our food supply. And so they were taking away their papers to come into the country until they got their shots at the airport and not letting them in. And the farmers were reaching out to us and saying, this is insane, our migrant workers are dying, they're sick, they're young, 19, 20, 25-year-old guys that are hard-working, fit people dropping dead in the airport in quarantine. And then there was all kinds of others, but they specifically brought in this medical officer of health. And the other point I want to make is there's an act in Ontario called the Health Protection and Promotion Act. And everybody needs to look that up. For decades I've been talking about this, and I always said, this piece of legislation is the most terrifying piece of legislation I've ever read, and I've read a lot of them. This one's the worst, and it gave them sweeping powers if in a pandemic happened, that they would be able to do this, take your property, put you in jail. All these things are written in the Health Protection and Promotion Act. And I've dealt with it for a long time with legal cases that I've done, and we always said this is terrifying, and obviously when COVID hit, they utilized that to do everything that they did to us in Ontario, including like rolling out the vaccinations, all of the stuff that they did. They based it all on there, and they did it. Somebody was talking about the Dan Hartman case. The judge ruled that the government cannot be held liable because they're protected under the Health Protection and Promotion Act. So everything these medical officers of health who graduate from Dalla Lana School of Public Health are not accountable for everything they do. All the vaccines they bring to your kids in school, all of the unlawful things they do to get them into your kids in school, the school clinics, you know, giving the HPV vaccines to boys even though they don't have uteruses or cervixes. It's just insane, and it's all done through this Health Protection and Promotion Act. So yes, the Dalla Lana School of Public Health is ground zero for all of what's happening. And I think somebody else talked about that, what was that? That board they had, the one that, yeah, the COVID board, yeah. Oh, the advisory committee, right, the science advisory committee, 90% of them came from the Dalla Lana School of Public Health. They were all graduates. So that's, no, it's ground zero. So yes, Dalla Lana School of Public Health, the information is all up there. If you look, you'll find it. And some of it's on our website.
My name is Wisława Delatka. I am retired healthcare therapist. Thank you for these powerful movies. And actually, I want to kind of speak about this judge who said there's no duty after that. So this judge actually broke the criminal code because he impersonated the God. Our Bill of Rights is based on supremacy on the God, and no one should impersonate. And this I know some codes, but I forgot this one. So this judge is criminal. And actually, to this day in Ontario, nobody has a copy of this emergency act. I asked public health, I went to police officer and I said, give me a copy. There was no emergency, though you didn't have a due process. If you put emergency, you should have due process. Due process means what happens if we put the mandate isolation? You know, is it necessary? Plus they vaccinate too, so they did break another criminal code. They do the break right to privacy, right to autonomy. So we have so many cases, injure people, dead people, and I say it's no negotiate with criminals. We need to criminalize them. We need to criminalize politicians, public health. Now public health suspend children that they don't provide the vaccine update. This is terrorism. This is a criminal act. They're doing this as like a negligence of the child. Plus they impersonate the power. They impersonate the judge. The same for principle. So we need to criminalize them. So it's no time to negotiate, to write the petition. We don't talk to Paul Bernardo, oh, do this, do this. We criminalize them. That's it.
So many well-spoken people here today in the audience and of course on the stage. Thank you, brave warriors, for everything you do. No one is brave as you. So, 3 questions, hopefully really quick ones. Is there any evidence of these vaccine placebos? Is there any evidence-based studies on the shedding from the so-called vaccinations? And whatever happened to the rubbery substances found by pathologists and morticians and people who are vaccinated?
Okay, the first again. Let's walk.
Sorry, I disappeared.
I can see you out there somewhere. I see white and everything else is black. So.
Oh, the first question
Yeah.
is there any evidence of placebos?
Okay, on that point, I've not seen any. Now, I have looked at myself 44 lots worldwide. We do know that there are differences in the Pfizer thoughts based on the and John and Gilthorpe's work out of Sweden. Some lots cause more harms than others. I have looked at 12 Pfizer lots and the rest Moderna. I've looked at the Wuhan monovalent bivalent XBB 1.5 and the brand new J1 boosters. That I looked at out of and I talked on it at an injection of truth this month. The brand new booster is just as bad as all of the other. It still contains a pile of DNA and SVV 40 sequences in there. In COVID patients, doctors worry about patients with a CT of 35. In these shots, I'm finding they spike and the SV40 between a CT of 10 and 15. So it's way more, it's about 600 billion copies per dose wrapped in a lipid nanoparticle injected into your cells, and therefore you should not take these at all unless you want DNA in your cells. So the second question was?
Is there any evidence on these vaccinations doing any shedding?
Okay, the whole concept of shedding is real. There's been all kinds of work out there. I talked last month with you learn out of Austria. She's done a pile of work in this field. The Tamer paper on the DNA contamination published in December showed in cell culture all of these spike protein in the cells is released in exosomes, and that a exosome is like a lipid nanoparticle. It's a lipid bubble that can travel elsewhere, and it is shed. What we don't know is in there is there mRNA, is there DNA? So that work needs to be done. And on your calamari thought work, I've got some of those. I've been in touch with both Kevin McCarran in Japan and Hirschman and Morris from New Zealand. It's on my phone. I just can't recall the names. They are working out exactly what these are. I've not looked at his email since he sent this to us. So we are working on working out what these things actually are. I was emailed about a major one on he found this past week, and so it's still there, it's still ongoing, and it's still a major thing we are looking at.
And I can add some comments to your first two questions. So on the side of placebo, so in the clinical trials, and so I'll give you the example of Pfizer, since that's been the most popular COVID shot used around the world. So unlike historical vaccines, they did appear to use a true placebo in that trial. So now let's talk about what the results were and with where the goalposts have currently been moved, right? So you saw in the movie, we're all told that the virus stops with the shots, right? You got the shots, can't get infected, can't transmit the virus, right? They then moved the goalposts way over here, and everybody's still told to get them to this day because it dampens the severity of the disease. And what they want you to be scared about, they want you to be scared about the risk of hospitalization and death, right? Those are the two key things. We're not too worried about mild, moderate disease. So these are where the goalposts are. So they did use a placebo, so fine. Let's look at what the data said. They didn't hide it, but most people never looked at it. Because what they did is when the paper was published for the clinical trial result for Pfizer in the New England Journal of Medicine, and even when you can find the paper, you scroll way down the bottom of the page where they have supplementary data. That's where they have the key data. So these are where the goalposts were moved. We're talking about hospitalization and deaths. And what I can tell you absolutely definitively, and I've testified in court under oath on this, and presented the data in courts, and then decisions were made without ruling on the evidence. The evidence is there. You can go and you can look yourself in the supplementary data. There were numerically more deaths in the placebo group than in the control group. Because at the end of the day, if you're in an experiment, what you care about is all-cause mortality. You're hearing about that a lot today. So when you look at it, that's what I'm talking about. When you look at the all-cause mortality that occurred, for whatever reason, in that trial, right? Death doesn't lie. There were numerically more deaths in the placebo group than there were numerically, it's the reverse, there were numerically more deaths in the group that got the COVID-19 shot than in the placebo group. And there was no statistically significant difference in the hospitalization rate. So everything to this day they argue is the benefit of these shots. The original clinical trial data that were published shows that there was no statistically significant benefit. Now, the numerically higher number of deaths in the group that got the shot, it wasn't statistically significant. But, so that's the whole point. So as a scientist, what you say to them, you look at those data, is there was no statistically significant benefit to getting the shots in terms of hospitalization or preventing deaths. So that's what that says. So yes, they use a placebo, and in comparing the placebo group to the group that got the shots, there's zero data from the original clinical trial to justify why we're pushing these shots. And then the other thing that's very important to note is what happened actually, there were numerically more deaths in the group that got the shots. And worse, this is crazy, this is not how science is supposed to work. When you initiate clinical trial, you commit to seeing it through to the very end, and you don't change the clinical trial design. One of the things with the remdesivir story, right? You know that one study that Fauci did to try and justify it, he moved the goalposts in that study. You don't do that with a clinical trial. You agree up front what the design is, and you follow through to the end, and your medical product lives or dies based on what the data show at the end of the agreed upon endpoint for that trial. And in these clinical trials, yes, they have a placebo group, but what people need to understand is they shut that placebo group down prematurely. 3 months into the study. It's ridiculous. They vaccinated everybody who was supposed to be in the placebo group. So that the average length of time we actually have to follow safety in that group is on average about 8 weeks, that's it. They shut them down, and interestingly, when they gave the shots to the placebo group, they added one more death. So there you go with that group. And then the other thing I just wanted to mention when it comes to the shedding, we do have definitive data, it's been published. It's been shown that the fragments of the synthetic RNA get into breast milk and gets fed to suckling infants. And in fact, there's a model out there now. So there's lots of scientific peer-reviewed literature on that aspect. So that's shedding. Shedding is asking, does it get out of the body, and can other individuals around an individual be exposed? Yes, an infant can be exposed through a breastfeeding mother. And the model is this now, openly admitting, the shot goes in the mother's shoulder. There is systemic biodistribution through the lymphatic system and the blood system, and the vaccine and components thereof get to the breast tissue, where it gets into cells in the breasts. And Dr. Speicher mentioned this concept of exosomes, which are little fat bubbles that can bleb off from the cells. And so in the cells in the breast, these little fat bubbles can bleb off, carrying fragments of that synthetic RNA into the breast milk. And it gets fed to infants. And I can tell you from looking at documentation through Freedom of Information requests from Health Canada, they were concerned with, like I said, again, go look at the monographs. These vaccine manufacturers this very day say that they have no idea what, and that's a lie, because like I said, the science is out there published. We do know it gets into breast milk. The synthetic RNA at least gets into the breast milk. But they claim they don't know. They have no idea whether anything can get into the breast milk. And so they can't assure safety of breastfeeding children. Right? But the science actually says, and we're giving this to breastfeeding women. We're encouraging them to get these shots. All right? We do know it gets in there. And Health Canada actually was studying international safety databases on this and identified multiple cases where very early on, nobody was encouraging breastfeeding women to get these shots. But inadvertently, or apparently inadvertently, there were women who were breastfeeding who got these shots. And they studied them. And the number of issues with lactation, the incidence of lactation issues was ridiculously high, as were clinical issues with the breastfeeding infants. So yes, shedding is a reality. Again, to what extent? Again, I would say everything we listed for blood, right? There was a question about, is our blood supply safe? Everything I listed there, the intact vaccine formulation, plus the lipid nanoparticles, plus the modified RNA, plus the spike protein, plus the contaminating DNA, all need to be studied, and all kinds of tissues. Again, it's very easy to do and very quick to do. Just take samples of sweat and urine and saliva and feces and so on. And we can definitively answer the question of how expensive that problem is. And I do want to highlight one other thing, because for those of you who aren't aware, there's now the next generation technology. And this question about shedding gets amplified. The concern gets amplified when you start talking about self-amplifying RNA vaccines. Because this is a situation where I honestly don't see how you have large quantities of the first generation mRNA vaccines being shed. I think people who experience negative effects when they're around people are probably getting exposed to very tiny quantities, but they probably have developed hypersensitivities like allergies, so they only need to be exposed to small quantities. But this is the thing, with the new self-amplifying RNA technology, scientists have already estimated that you need as few as 3 of those molecules to get into a cell. And now all of a sudden you've kickstarted a process where you get self-amplification of that RNA. So the concern there is if shedding is occurring, and we do know it's, like I said, it is occurring, but to what degree, if we start rolling out self-amplifying RNA vaccines, that we have to, I am not comfortable with that until the science is done. I don't want somebody around me who's got a self-amplifying RNA vaccine, unless I know definitively they are not shed in sufficient quantities to inoculate my cells, because otherwise, without my consent, I'm being vaccinated.
Thank you, Barbara. Now, there looks like there's a few people in the audience that want some questions. If you can make them quick, that would be great.
Hi, that's Scott Smith. Came all the way down from St. Thomas. I want to thank everybody for coming. Everybody on the stage. You're our heroes for speaking up. Dr. Brian, I'm following you since your colleagues threw you under the bus 3.5 years ago. Thanks for standing up for us. And my question is, I haven't gone to Christmas. Because my whole family has took this bioweapon vaccine death shots. Does a blood test truly show what's in their bloodstream? Because everybody that I'm talking to, I've been sending to a live blood test. I had mine done twice. Does a live blood test guarantee what's in their body? If they got a negative shot or if they got the bioweapon?
Yeah, so unfortunately I can't really address that. I'm not an expert with the live blood imaging. I know people have been looking into that. What I can say is what I know from live blood imaging, there's a lot of great information that can be derived from that, and I personally would love to see a lot of research going into that. I believe that needs to be, we need to develop that as a legitimate scientific research tool. Just like we have all kinds of methods we use for analyzing the blood, right? We do blood counts and so on. There's a lot of data that could be derived there. Right now, what I can say is the field is lacking a lot of peer-reviewed scientific literature to support it. It's being sort of by mainstream scientists and stuff, it's sort of being pushed aside. What I can say is I've assessed the technique being done. There's lots of information, lots of great data that can be harvested from there. We need to run proper scientific studies to try and really figure out what information we can get from that. And beyond that, so I see it as a very powerful tool that we need to implement. Beyond that, I don't have the expertise to comment specifically on the question.
Okay, thank you.
On that point, same thing, I'm not an expert there. I would follow Dr. Wendy Roscoe, R-O-S-C-O-E. She is making headway in this field, so.
If you guys have time to just briefly say something about the aluminum and mercury in these with respects, because I get all kinds of stuff, like it's a big deal for me, but they're saying, well, it's a different kind, it's this, it's that, whatever. Anyways, thank you.
Can you comment on the aluminum and mercury, Byron, or anybody at the table?
I think you're talking about thimerosal.
Yeah, I've got to, so as a vaccinologist, I have to admit, it's going to take me a long time to find the time in the future to go back and look at a lot of this historical data. But I mean, the thing that's obvious is what you're talking about there is you're talking about metals that are dangerous in the body, should they accumulate. And so the one thing I can say definitively, right, is the way vaccine science has progressed, and I admit that when it comes to clinical trials, I'm not responsible for the clinical trials that have been run, especially by these pharma companies. But they definitely could do a far better job. And I agree, we probably have to go back and revisit the safety of a lot of these things. But what is undebatable, like non-debatable, is that these vaccines are looked at one at a time, right? And they try and convince you when looking in isolation each vaccine on its own, they claim is safe and effective. There's no question. I have a concern about the number of shots that we've driven this up to, right? A lot of children, by the time they hit adulthood, are, hitting the ballpark of 80 shots. Now, and I think it's important because there's, indirectly there's recognition these are being taken, mercury and aluminum are being taken out of the modern day shots, but they're still there in a lot of them. And there's no question that if you give too much, I mean, that's just straightforward. You don't even forget about a vaccine. You just inject those and accumulate too high a dose, and it can be toxic. So there's no question about that. So the one thing I think is unquestionable. I would love to see, as a vaccinologist, I'm open to this. I would love to see studies that look at the sum total. to stop looking at these one at a time. We don't do that with drugs.
Yep.
We recognize drug interactions. Pharmacists, there's pharmacists who are specially trained. You know, you see if somebody has a bunch of chronic illnesses, they'll see the family physician, and they'll refer them to a specialist, and maybe another specialist, and maybe another specialist. And by the time they come back and see the family physician a couple of years ago, next thing they know, they've been put on 8 different medications, right? And there's pharmacists who will specialize in reviewing all those 8 medications and seeing are there safety issues here. And often those pharmacists who specialize in that to find a way to whittle down the number of medications from 8 down to 5 or 4, right? And actually get rid of side effects that are being caused by these interactions. We need to do the same thing with vaccines, there's no question, right? We need to stop looking one at a time. I'd love to see what's the impact on the body, and especially the immune system, of giving 80 shots versus none at all, and see what that does. But I don't know if a lot of scientists would like to see the answer to that. So.
Aluminum, it interferes with your blood-brain barrier, and it allows the vaccines have also called polysorbate 80,
Yep.
and they allow, their studies show that it allows it to cross the blood-brain barrier where it shouldn't,
Yep.
and other things that shouldn't, including the thimerosal. And they show that these heavy metals are cumulative. So when you're getting 80, it's not, they're just testing as one okay, but they're giving kids, up to 80. And they are cumulative, and we found that in some children, especially with the first Vaxxed movie, they discuss a lot. And so in the first Vaxxed movie and the second Vaxxed movie, and even this one, the third one, they're all on CHD-TV for free. You can watch them. The first Vaxxed movie is all about autistic children and how the thimerosal ended up being over the amount that they were, children were supposed to be exposed to, and when you added it up cumulatively. And this is actually RFK Jr. got involved with this whole vaccine thing, researching it, because he was an environmental lawyer, and some parent came to him and said, hey, there's mercury. You're saying don't eat the fish with the mercury, but you're injecting it into our children. And that's where he started researching, and that's where he came to realize that there are no studies being done on these vaccines where they're actually using the gold standard of science, which are double-blind, placebo-controlled studies. And there are no studies, like Byron said, where they're actually looking at, okay, if you give you an MMR, what's the reaction to that? They're not comparing that to a placebo ever. They're comparing that to what if they give you an MMR with chickenpox. So they're comparing not apples, they're comparing 2 vaccines, and then they look and say, does one of them have more reactions than the other? And they say, no, they pretty much both have the same amount of reactions, so it's safe. And that's what they're really basing the science on. And so they're not looking at how cumulative these heavy metals can be. They're not testing to see if it's opening, these heavy metals are opening the blood-brain barrier and allowing things like polysorbate 80 to cross. And all in the Vaxxed movie, it talks about exactly this, the thimerosal, and how it does cross the blood-brain barrier, and how it is cumulative, and how it is found in children's brains with autism. Yeah, and now Alzheimer's. They're finding it, and yes, the thimerosal is being definitely, heavy metals are being found in Alzheimer's and autistic children's brains.